The door groaned softly before a silhouette emerged, cautious, deliberate, the faint scuff of slippered feet gliding over the rug. My breath stayed light and measured, though my pulse thrummed like an alarm. I'd left the bedside drawer slightly open, just enough. The lure was set. Cassie lingered briefly by the bed's edge, then moved closer. I heard the faint clink as she eased the drawer open. A moment of stillness. Then crack. Her scream shattered the quiet, sharp and piercing. I rose slowly, flicked on the lamp. Light spilled over her twisted expression. She gripped her hand, the mousetrap swinging from her fingers like a steel verdict. "What's wrong with you?" she yelled, voice raw. I met her gaze steadily. "What were you looking for, Cassie?" Before she could respond, Marius appeared in the doorway, eyes heavy with sleep and concern. "What's happening?" "Your mother rigged her drawer," Cassie snapped, brandishing her bruised hand. "She's unhinged, Marius. Look at this." Marius glanced at me, then at the drawer, bewildered, caught. I clasped my hands calmly in my lap. "She was in my room at 2 a.m., rifling through my drawer. Does that sound like worry to you?" I thought I heard a noise," Cassie stammered. "I was checking on you." "Without a light," I said evenly, and going straight for my drawer. Marius dragged a hand through his hair. "Cass, why were you even in there?" She glared at me. "Because she's suspicious, thinking everyone's out to take her things. I was trying to help." I leaned closer. "Let's be clear. You were searching for something, and I knew you would. That's why the trap was there." Cassie stared as if I'd struck her. Marius stood silent, the air growing thick between us. "I think," I said softly, "it's time I show you both what else I've kept in that drawer." 6 months before, I arrived with a cloth bag, a pharmacy sack, and hands that shook. The mild stroke left no lasting marks, but it rattled me enough to accept Marius's offer of the spare room. Cassie stood beside him, smiling brightly. "Of course, stay as long as you want. We're family." I offered $900 for the mortgage, declined at first, then taken after discussion. I insisted on contributing, packing lunches, folding clothes, walking the kids to the bus, even preparing dinners. Cassie always smiled, thanked me warmly at first. By month 2, something changed. I couldn't pinpoint it precisely. Cassie started refolding the linens I'd done. "You make them so crisp, like a clinic," she'd say with a laugh, but her eyes held no warmth. One Sunday, when I cooked herb-crusted chicken, she picked off the seasoning and muttered to Marius, "Too much salt again." I wasn't meant to overhear, but I did. They stopped asking me to join them on the deck for warm evenings. I'd catch their laughter through the kitchen window as I scrubbed dishes alone. Cassie began locking the study door during the day, claiming it was cluttered and private. Then, strange things happened. My favorite cashmere scarf disappeared. A bottle of prescription ear drops felt oddly empty. My beloved mug, the one with the violet pattern, reappeared chipped with no explanation. I told myself not to dwell. I'd lived alone for years. Maybe I wasn't settling in well. Maybe it was me, but the edge in Cassie's tone when she said Nora, the way she stopped embracing me when I handed over the kids' permission slips, it added up. I'd catch her staring sometimes when she thought I wasn't looking. Eyes sharp. Cold, that's when I stopped leaving valuables in my bag and started locking my bedroom door even for a quick trip to the bathroom. I didn't mention it to Marius, not yet. I still hoped naively that kindness would suffice, but I began keeping notes. Silently, carefully. The first entry, March 12, missing necklace, top drawer. The necklace was the first. Silver, delicate, a heirloom from my mother. I hadn't worn it in months, but I knew it was in the satin pouch in my dresser's top drawer. One morning, I checked the pouch, empty. I searched every pocket, every bag, every corner. Cassie shrugged when I brought it up. "Maybe you left it somewhere odd. You've seemed tired lately." The next week, my joint pain pills tasted strange, slightly gritty. Days later, I woke at midnight, sweating, heart pounding. I checked the bottle. The pharmacy label was mine, but something felt wrong. When I told Cassie, she chuckled. "Maybe you swapped bottles. Sure you didn't take an extra dose?" I nodded, said it was possible. But that afternoon, I dug out the pill tracker I'd used when living alone. I started logging again, doses, dates, side effects. Then the wallet. I'd withdrawn $80 for groceries, spent $27. The rest should have been tucked behind my ID. When I went to buy stamps the next day, only a lone $10 remained. "Maybe you left it in a jacket," Cassie suggested. "Or handed over the wrong bill." I stopped mentioning things after that. Instead, I kept a notebook hidden behind the bathroom towels. I recorded every incident, dates, items, conversations. At first, it felt foolish, overly cautious. But page by page, the pattern grew undeniable. Cassie was careful. Subtle, never enough for a confrontation, just enough to erode. Marius was no help. Always preoccupied, work, kids, bills. When I got his attention, he'd smile, pat my shoulder. "You're carrying a lot, Mom. Don't let it weigh you down." I smiled back. But inside, something had shifted. I no longer trusted the calm or the smiles, so I secured my valuables, counted my pills. And when I bought the lottery ticket at the gas station, I kept it secret. It was a Tuesday. I stopped for bread and soap and picked up a scratch-off ticket on a whim, like tossing a coin into a fountain, knowing better. I scratched it in the car, engine off, heater humming faintly. $4,800. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to matter, enough to breathe, enough to claim something mine again. I told no one, not Marius, not the kids, not Cassie. But the next morning, while calling the lottery office to arrange pickup, I stepped into the hall. I thought the house was empty. I was mistaken. Cassie's voice floated from the kitchen moments later, just loud enough. "Need me to grab bread, since someone forgot yesterday?" I knew she'd overheard. That night after dinner, I waited until the house was still. I slipped into my room and opened the nightstand drawer. Inside, I placed an unsealed envelope, blank except for a sticky note. "Claim form, do not lose." Beside it, I set the mousetrap. Basic snap model. I'd bought it last autumn for a pantry pest we never caught. I tested it, still sharp, set it carefully, then placed my wallet in plain sight. A second envelope stuffed with old receipts added bulk. The real ticket. Folded tightly, tucked inside my bra's lining, close to my skin, safe and warm. I lay in bed after, heart steady, breathing even. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about certainty, about truth. For months, I'd let her twist my memory, doubt my senses, question the everyday. But this, I'd know. And if she took the bait, I'd be ready. When the clock glowed 2:17 a.m. and the door creaked, I stayed still. I waited. The sound was unmistakable. The sharp snap of the trap, followed by a scream that sliced the silence like a blade. I sat up slowly, switched on the lamp, and let the light fall over Cassie. Crouched, clutching her hand like a wounded creature. She glared at me, eyes wide and frantic. The mousetrap hung from her fingers. "What's wrong with you?" she gasped, voice breaking. I didn't waver. "What were you doing in my drawer, Cassie?" she faltered. I heard a sound. I thought you might have fallen or needed help." "At 2 a.m., I asked calmly, without a light and going straight for my drawer. The hallway light snapped on. Marius appeared, rubbing his eyes. "What's going on?" Cassie turned to him, waving her hand dramatically. "Your mom set a trap in her drawer. Look what she did." Marius stared at the trap, still dangling, then at me. "Mom, she was in my room," I said. "Going through my things. The trap wasn't hidden. I set it in plain view." Cassie scoffed. "She's delusional, Marius. She's been off for weeks." "I was making sure she was okay." Marius looked between us, caught in confusion and doubt. "Why were you in her nightstand?" "She's not well. She's been accusing me of things, losing stuff." Cassie stopped, clutching her hand again. "You always take her side." He didn't respond, not immediately. And in the pause, I saw something in his eyes. Uncertainty, doubt. I took a slow breath. "There's more you both need to see." Cassie stepped back. "What now?" I reached for the folder I'd slid under the mattress earlier, placed it in my lap, and held it steady. "Proof," I said. "So there's no more guessing about what's been happening here." I opened the folder carefully, keeping my hand steady. I pulled out the photos first, 6, printed in sharp color. Cassie with a man who wasn't my son, outside a diner 2 towns away. One showed her kissing him, in daylight, unapologetic. Cassie's mouth opened, but no sound came. "I didn't hire a detective," I said, laying the photos on the blanket. "I just shopped at the same market as your boyfriend's mother. She mistook me for you." Marius stepped closer, staring at the images as if they might shift into something harmless. "They didn't." I pulled out a printed transcript. "Recordings," I said. "From the audio device I hid in the coat closet. Just snippets. You on the phone, talking about getting rid of the old lady. Asking someone what to do if I didn't wake up one day. Should I continue?" Cassie's face went pale. "You violated my privacy," she choked out. "You violated my room repeatedly." I handed over the final item, a notarized copy of Marius's will from 2 years ago with an altered clause. I circled the change. "This was modified without his knowledge. His original doesn't match. I checked." Marius spoke at last. "Is this true?" His voice broke, not angry, just fragile. Cassie glared at me, cornered. "She's twisting everything, Marius." "No," I said softly. "This time I came prepared." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The evidence sat between us, loud as a storm. Cassie reached for Marius's arm, but he pulled away. For the first time in months, the room felt calm, clear. I stood, holding the folder close. "You wanted to search my drawer, Cassie. Now you've seen what's inside." When she said nothing, I knew it had hit. It wasn't finished. But the silence meant the truth had broken something open. "She's manipulating you," Cassie shouted, pointing at me like I was the one sneaking through drawers in the dark. "She's turned it all against me, Marius. Can't you see?" I didn't blink. I reached into the folder again and pulled out a receipt. Simple, dated. Retainer paid to Leona Hatch, attorney at law. The name made Cassie freeze, her cousin. "I spoke to Leona last week," I said evenly. "Asked if she had any conflicts of interest. She said family or not, she won't defend theft." Cassie opened her mouth, then closed it. "I've been paying your mortgage," I went on, "feeding your kids, folding your clothes. I've bought groceries, swept floors, watched your children so you could sleep late and scroll your phone. I've given more than I've taken, and you've treated me like a weight." Marius stood silent, ashen, Cassie's hands balled into fists. "This is your scheme, isn't it? You've been waiting to tear us apart." "No," I said, voice steady. "I've been waiting to stop betraying myself for the sake of peace." I handed her the final document, a cease and desist letter. Clear terms, accusations of tampering, threat of legal action. She skimmed the first lines and laughed coldly. "You think you'll win? I'm not trying to win, I'm setting a boundary." Marius looked at the letter, then at me. "You saw a lawyer," I nodded. "After the pill mix-ups, after the cash, after the first necklace vanished. I gave you both time to fix it, but I'm done waiting for people to do right by me just because they should." Cassie stared, anger in her eyes flickering to fear. She didn't speak again as I walked past her. Didn't protest as I gathered my things from the hall and packed a small bag. Marius followed me to the stairs but stayed silent. I didn't ask him to pick a side. I just left quietly, certain I'd reached the edge of my own life. The apartment wasn't much, a one-bedroom above a fabric shop, but the lease was mine. The windows opened easily, and I could leave the door unlocked without worry. For the first time in months, I didn't wake to footsteps outside my room. I used a third of the lottery winnings for the deposit and simple furnishings. The rest I saved for something I hadn't dared dream of, a shop. Small, my own. A flower stall with space for seedlings and light. I found it wedged between a closed bakery and a nail salon, a faded for-lease sign in the grimy window. I saw potential, not grime. I hadn't heard from Marius in over a week when he appeared at the shop as I cleaned the front counter. He didn't knock, just stood in the doorway, hands in pockets, eyes low. "This is nice," he said. "It will be," I replied, rinsing the cloth. He nodded. "Cassie says you're trying to ruin our family." I looked at him, the son I'd raised, now carrying the weight of his choices in his slumped shoulders. "I'm trying to protect myself," I said. "There's a difference." He didn't argue, just looked around the half-finished shop, half-vision, then back at me. "You really think she meant to harm you?" "I think she didn't care if she did." He sat on an upturned box. "I don't know where I'm supposed to stand in this." "I'm not asking you to stand," I said softly, just to pause long enough to see clearly. We sat in silence, the kind that didn't need filling. When he stood to leave, he hugged me briefly, hesitant, and left without another word. I locked the door behind him, not out of fear but finality. That night I slept with the windows open, the breeze weaving through the curtains. For the first time in ages, I didn't dream of being elsewhere. I named the shop Sprout and Blossom because it felt true. We all come from something, and if we're lucky or determined, we grow. It was little more than a converted shed with uneven floors and a door that jammed in the morning damp. But the paint was new, the shelves stocked, and the bell above the door chimed like a small victory with every visitor. I sold hand-wrapped bouquets and herbal tea in mismatched cups. People lingered longer than necessary. Some bought nothing. They came to sit in the sunlit corner, sip lavender tea, and share things they couldn't voice at home. Widows, grandfathers, teens, weary nurses, I listened. I didn't give advice unless asked, just space. It was early spring when Lenora from the framing shop next door rushed in, clutching her phone like it was burning. "You know her, right?" she asked. "Cassie Lennox." I nodded once. "She's all over the community app," she whispered. "Arrested for credit card fraud. Someone tipped off her boss, client accounts were hit, it's messy." I thanked her. She waited for a reaction, but I only smiled and poured her a cup of mint tea. After she left, I flipped the sign to closed. I wiped the counter slowly, refolded a cloth, and sat behind the register, hands around a cold mug. I didn't feel triumphant, just finished. The world hadn't judged her. She'd lit the spark herself. And now maybe Marius would see the flames for what they were. Not a mistake. Not a bad moment, but a pattern. As the light moved across the tiled floor and the petals on the display daisies curled inward for the night, I felt something settle. Not victory, not resentment, just a quiet peace. I lit a candle in the front window and watched the flame dance, small and steady, the way I'd rebuilt one step at a time. 1 year later, the garden behind sprout and blossom is transformed from the day I first turned the stubborn earth with hands still stiff from cold. Now trellises arc with clematis vines, and sage bushes dot the corners like soft green commas. Lavender edges the path, blooming, fragrant, and free. I host workshops on weekends. Kids craft seed balls with sticky hands, and older women mix tinctures with dried petals and stories. Some just come to sit, sip tea, and breathe. No one prize, that's the rule. Isari helps after school. She wears an oversized apron and chats with the plants like they're friends. Thij builds fairy homes under the peonies and swears he hears them stirring when no one's looking. I don't correct him. Marius visits Thursdays. He doesn't stay long. Sometimes he brings a book for the kids, sometimes just his quiet. He never mentions Cassie. I never ask. One afternoon, as the sun warmed the patio and the kids chased butterflies with wooden sticks, he stood beside me and said, "You were right." I didn't say I told you so. I just placed a hand over his and pressed once. Forgiveness, in my language, is silent, but I haven't forgotten. The drawer in my bedroom stays locked, not from fear of theft, but because I've learned what it means to guard what's mine, even if I must do it alone. The real healing didn't start the night the mousetrap snapped. It began with the first customer who called me Miss Noreen and asked for her bouquet in blue instead of cream. It grew when Asari whispered, "I like it better here." And when Thij buried a cracked saucer in the soil like it might sprout into something new, there's no trace of Cassie in this garden, not even in the earth.